With a new administration in the United States, countries around the world have been shifting their diplomatic gears from working with an America First policy to a more conventional form of engagement under President Joe Biden. This, of course, includes South Korea, a longtime ally of the United States and a major trading partner. Former President Donald Trump left much to be desired in bilateral ties, and in the face of common challenges, primarily North Korea, will relations between Seoul and Washington grow stronger under Joe Biden? And how soon will Biden proceed on dealing with North Korea when he's already grappling with multiple domestic priorities? To get the answers, we turn to Dennis Allen Ross, who served as congressman for Florida from 2011 to 2019. After 4 terms in the House of Representatives, he is now a distinguished professor of political science at Southeastern University, where he also leads the American Center for Political Leadership. Very warm welcome to you, Mr. Ross. It's lovely to see you again and great to have you on the show.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to see you again, and I appreciate this opportunity.
Well, let's go straight into the questions, Mr. Ross. Now, relations between South Korea and the United States, they've been very strong throughout the decades, but they did face some bumps in the road over the course of Mr. Trump's presidency due to him questioning the terms of our bilateral free trade agreement and the shared defense costs of keeping American soldiers on Korean soil. Do you see the relationship warming between your new president, Joe Biden, and President Moon Jae-in?
I do think it's going to get warmer, and I'll tell you why. I think it's more about styles than anything. You know, President Trump did more, I think, to give the South Koreans great hope, not only in denuclearization, but also reunification. He was an objective-driven person and would do some pretty sensational things to accomplish an objective. President Biden will be more process-oriented. He'll rely on diplomacy. But I think what you'll also see is that our economic ties have become so strong over the decades that we are really good partners, and we have a great partnership between South Korea and the United States. So that will lead him and his administration to want to develop good ties with South Korea.
Well, President Biden, he's made it very clear that he wants to strengthen US leadership in the world and revive the spirit of multilateralism. Do you think there's a sense of support or unity behind that in Congress? Or do you think some of his foreign policy initiatives might be challenged by, well, your party, the Republican Party?
Well, I think there might be some pushback just because under the previous administration, under Trump, he was more of a bilateral negotiator in all his agreements. You know, he got out of the Trans-Pacific Partnership. He renegotiated NAFTA. He even renegotiated the Korean-U.S. free trade agreement. He was more, he didn't really look at multilateralism as an asset. But I think that if we're going to develop stronger ties in the Asian world, we've got to be able to have multilateral agreements. And I think that this president recognizes that. I think Congress will want to see some multilateral agreements. Well, I think they'll want to probably revisit under Biden the TTP or the TPP. But I don't think that you're going to get too much pushback from the Republicans in Congress just because it's not at the top of their list right now. You know, China's always going to be a threat, and that's where I think that multilateralism helps relations with the U.S. and other countries in Asia.
And of course, many countries have shown support for President Biden's pledge to return to more of a conventional US diplomacy and strengthening multilateralism, although they do want to strengthen bilateral ties as well, obviously. What kind of common values do you think the United States and South Korea have shared and will continue to share? And what do you think they could possibly cooperate on together going forward as they face many global challenges?
The South Korean United States relationship is so unique and so of a wonderful story. And let me just put in a shout out for South Korea for their resources in supplying the PPE, the personal protection equipment that we so desperately needed. That was wonderful. That exhibits the relationship that we have with South Korea. But it even goes much further than that, as you know. We share technology, we share resources, we have good trade agreements. I think that you're going to see our ties get stronger because of technology. For example, you know, everything's moving to electric and autonomous vehicles. Well, you know, South Korea is a little bit ahead of the curve on technology when it comes to automobiles. And I see that we're going to want to have a better relationship. We're going to want to make sure that we've got the latest and most fascinating resources in when it comes to automation as well as technology. And I think you're going to see a continued shared partnership in that arena. We've had that for some 80 years now with South Korea, and we've both benefited from it very well. This administration won't turn a blind eye to that, in my opinion.
So hopefully new areas of cooperation, especially in technology and perhaps even climate technology as well. But then some worry that President Biden might not focus as much on foreign policy or strengthening foreign relations, especially forging new trade deals, for instance, given the urgency of the domestic issues that he's currently working through. Do you think that's true? And especially when it comes to North Korea, when do you think he's going to finally sit down and address North Korea?
Well, first of all, what's going on in the United States right now is first of its kind in the sense that we've seen the violence to the level that it's been, as close as it's been to our democracy. And President Biden has called for unity, and I enjoyed his inauguration speech, but we got to see if it's reflected in his actions. And that's what I think he's going to be focusing on. I think that's what this Congress needs to focus on, is reuniting this nation. To do so will help build a better base for us. It'll make us much stronger in our international communities. But yes, we still have to concern ourselves with North Korea. Otherwise, North Korea will concern themselves with us. Since Trump and Kim Jong-un met in Hanoi, they've had, so North Korea has already had over 30 nuclear tests since then. It is still very much a threat. It is simmering. It needs to be addressed by this administration. And I'm hopeful that they will take the diplomatic route to begin working on a denuclearization or at least a freeze of some sort with North Korea. Sanctions do work. Will this administration continue the sanctions? I don't know. It depends on how much pressure they get from China.
And well, your Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, he says that the US will work on a full review of its North Korea policy. What would this normally involve?
Well, I'm glad to see that he's going to be our Secretary of State, although I love Mike Pompeo. Mike and I served together, but under the circumstances, you know, Secretary Blinken has experience dealing with South Korea, North Korea, Japan, China, as he served as Deputy Secretary of State. So I think that's a good omen for a good relationship or continued relationship between us. I think it also bodes well in trying to bring together Japan and South Korea and hopefully, if for lack of a better term, but an American term, bury the hatchet of what's been going on there. And I understand how crucial that is to South Koreans in the relationship with Japan and the harbingers of some of the atrocities that happened with Japan. But I think Blinken will help facilitate moving forward, and I'm hopeful of that. But then again, I'm always hopeful. So I think it's a good thing to have Secretary Blinken in this role. I think he will definitely begin negotiations, or at least diplomatic ties, with North Korea in an effort to try to, if not get the parties together, at least have some consensus as to where they should go next. North Korea deals with only one thing, power. And if they see weakness, they capitalize on that weakness. And I think that was Trump's probably biggest asset, is he didn't back down, and that brought him to the table. Unfortunately, though, there was no real negotiation done in advance, and so when they got together, they didn't know how they were going to get out of this agreement and what they were going to resolve. Blinken will probably have a different aspect of this and may go ahead and try to negotiate something behind the scenes so that these two world leaders could get together and at least accomplish some good measure. But again, we've got to show a great deal of strength in doing this. We can't show a weakness, and if it becomes necessary for economic sanctions to be increased, yes. But I think we should at least, and Secretary Blinken should look for, demanding a freeze on continued nuclear development.
Many are saying that, some are saying that North Korea may not, it may not be realistic to push for a full denuclearization straight away, but perhaps they could start on disarmament of nuclear weapons. What do you think about that? Do you think that's how Blinken's team, with Wendy Sherman, others like Jake Sullivan, might approach things?
I'm hopeful because, again, this team that Biden is putting in have a long experience under the Obama administration in dealing with South Korea. Now, I think that the Trump administration took it further. I think they raised the awareness of the importance of a strong South Korean-U.S. relation and a denuclearization of North Korea. But I also think that, you know, what South Koreans would love to see was not only a total disarmament, but really a reunification. And you can't have one, in my opinion, without the other. And I'm just hopeful, again, that Blinken and his team will look at how, especially under the circumstances, you know, COVID has hit everybody. And it's darn sure hit North Korea that is not in a position to really do much but try to survive. And so the North Korean people are going to be needing help. And Kim Jong-un has got to seek, you know, assistance as much as he doesn't want to. He just had the, you know, his party proclaim another title to him to make him stronger. We got to show strength when we negotiate, but we got to be at the table, and we have to have a plan in place of what we want to see as our exit strategy so that we can come home with something, and hopefully that is at least a freeze of the nuclear capabilities.
And whilst even South Korea was actually quite sidelined from the negotiation process between Kim Jong-un and President Donald Trump, even President Moon had to leave the room when the three leaders met up at the inter-Korean border very randomly. Do you think that the Biden administration is going to include more of South Korea and perhaps even other countries in the dialogue process?
Again, I remain hopeful. I think they have to. I firmly believe that in order to have a multilateral relationship, meaning with not only South Korea but Japan and China, that North Korea has to be part of the topic, and part of that topic has to be how do we get them to back down on not only their nuclearization but also on their economic ties to China. That's feeding them, that's keeping them alive, that's keeping them as the threat that they are. You know, President Biden, in my opinion, is not going to be as strong up front as President Trump was in his relationships with North Korea or with China. But that doesn't mean that diplomacy can't be a method by which we continue to try to build better relations and seek the nuclear disarmament that we want to have. It's going to be a long stretch. It will not happen in one president's administration. I think it's highly unlikely. I think that this is a generational change, that it will come from other generations of North Koreans and South Koreans over time having to endure this type of lifestyle for so long. So, you know, I just hope that Biden keeps it moving along, at least in a diplomatic fashion.
But the concern has been that while the Obama administration was, well, it was criticized for being rather passive when it came to diplomacy in Asia, while, of course, President Trump might have caused too much of a stir. How would you characterize Biden's style of diplomacy, particularly when it comes to dealing with countries like China?
Well, his style will be a lot less aggressive than Trump's. I can pretty much bet that. I'm hopeful that it'll be significantly more aggressive than President Obama was. President Obama had a different approach to international relations that I think was a bit of a setback to the United States internationally. And I'm hopeful that President Biden will at least assert not America First policy that Trump had, but at least American interest for mutually good relations policy as part of his diplomacy. What I mean by that is that we need economic partners. And Trump did a lot to upset the apple cart in trade agreements. And that was a setback to each country economically. I think if Biden pursues multilateral trade agreements that include the Asian alliance, that we'll be better off as a cohesive group of nations to confront North Korea. Obviously, China's got to be involved in this. We're going to have issues with that. I'm just concerned that President Biden's relationship with China might not be strong enough to protect the best interests of the Americans and America's interest. But I am very hopeful. Again, I have to be. It's my optimism that I have as an American that in this new presidency we will see continued strengthening of ties with our Asian counterparts.
But before America reclaims global leadership, though, it seems it needs to overcome this sense of division within the country. How have you been encouraging people to come together at the American Center for Political Leadership that you're currently heading?
We have been focusing on this well before what happened on January 6th at the Capitol happened. You know, we're one of the most unique nations ever known to mankind in that we begin our Constitution with the preamble of "we the people." And I talk to my students and we develop programs and we're collaborating with other universities throughout the country to incentivize civic engagement, community involvement, civic work, not about policy. Doesn't matter whether you're left, right, in the middle, or where. What matters is that you understand that in order for a better nation, you've got to be involved in the process to exercise your rights, but also to protect your rights. And so what we try to do is we try to bring diverse groups together and we teach civil discourse, the ability to have a difficult, controversial conversation without losing respect and civility for your opponent. In fact, I tell my students and I tell people when I lecture, whomever may be your adversary today may need to be your ally tomorrow. So don't burn that bridge. Keep that relationship building. You may not ever get along in the sense that you don't agree, but you can always build a relationship because you may need each other at some point in time. Now more than ever, the United States has got to look from within to reconcile themselves that we need to be a united front to create a better nation.
And that really
that we have had, it defines us.
That really defines
243 years.
Truly healthy democracy. And I'm afraid that we'll have to end the interview here. Congressman, I'm very sorry. But, well, that was Dennis Allen Ross, who served as Congressman for Florida from 2011 to 2019. Thank you again so much for your time today.
Thank you. Thank you. Enjoyed it.
And to our viewers, as always, thank you for watching.